explanation by Mr. Ali.
We were speaking about the logic of the sacrifice, and you were explaining that. Explain that to us. Is it that we offer the sacrifice to God, or does God offer the sacrifice on our behalf?
No, this is the biblical teaching is that this is an intertrinitarian activity. That is, Jesus is described as both the sacrifice and the sacrificer. He is both the Lamb of God as well as the high priest who offers this. And the relationship between the Father and the Son and the distinction between those divine persons explains what is actually taking place in regards to God the Father taking the role as judge, the Son taking the role as mediator and intercessor, and therefore the sacrifice that is offered is not, and I think, again, correct me if I misunderstood you, because I just misunderstood you once before. I think you said at one point, and I had it in my notes, here, I wrote this down, that our view is that God was making a deal with the devil. Either you're quoting somebody, or you made some statement about making a deal with the devil. Satan is not a part of this quote-unquote transaction. You mentioned early church fathers who held a ransom to Satan theory, for example, many of whom did not possess the entirety of the New Testament, most of whom could not read the Old Testament, hence did not have the sacrificial backgrounds to even begin to make heads or tails of things. And so when reading early church fathers, you have to ask yourself the question, how much of the biblical text are they really dealing with? I mean, certainly when you read early Muslim writers who may not have had access to all of the Quran, you don't exactly fault them for going on with what they had. But the idea of making a deal with the devil is this, as if this somehow is a payment that is given to him in some way, is not the biblical presentation whatsoever. Instead, what you do have here is the holiness and justice of God expressed in His law that requires the death of the sinner. And when you say that no one can die for the sins of another, as I said, no sinner can die for the sins of another, because a sinner is already under the wrath of God and has his own sins to pay for. That's what makes Jesus so unique. That's why He's called the Lamb of God. And really, I think the entire book of Hebrews is the Christian response to not only the Jewish rejection of the necessity of Jesus Messiah, but of the Islamic objections, which are very similar to those that are used by Jewish apologists today. Everything that the book of Hebrews develops in regard to the Old Testament typologies, in regards to the arguments from the tabernacle and everything else, I find to be tremendously consistent not only with the understanding of the Synoptic Gospels in John, but with Paul as well. The New Testament as a whole teaches this concept that Jesus gives Himself so that the wrath of God is propitiated and the barrier of fellowship is removed, so we can have shalom, peace. Romans 5:1, having been justified by faith, we have irene, shalom, peace with God.
You refer a lot to the book of Hebrews to explain this.
It's the longest book in the New Testament that addresses the subject.
Do we know who wrote the book of Hebrews?
No, we do not.